Jack and Violet have been married for several years. They were fortunate to maintain a strong bond, rarely arguing and always being considerate of each other. Both had stable jobs, and they lived in a cozy rented apartment. Violet had been buzzing with excitement for the past week. Very soon, they would celebrate a special anniversary, the day their relationship began. They had often talked about celebrating not just their wedding day, but other significant dates too. About a month ago, they decided that on this special day, Jack would pick her up from work, and they would head to a restaurant. On Wednesday, Violet woke up in high spirits. Today, she would get to escape the daily grind and enjoy a romantic evening with her husband. He had left for work before her, so they hadn't had much time to talk, but that was okay. The evening was just around the corner. Violet spent the last hour at work eagerly anticipating the night. Would her husband remember the flowers he brought on their first date, and which restaurant he picked? As the workday was coming to an end, her husband still hadn't called. He probably just plans to meet me downstairs, she thought, wrapping up her tasks and bidding her colleagues goodbye before heading outside. The woman scanned the area for her husband, but no one was waiting, with or without a bouquet. She began to call him, sensing something was off. He finally answered on the third try. "Violet, I'm at David's birthday party. He decided to celebrate this year, and he called me just today," her husband said loudly, trying to be heard over the background music. "I'll be home late. Don't wait up for me. Go to bed." Violet was so upset that she didn't even reply. She just hung up the phone. He forgot. He forgot about their little celebration, even though they had discussed it for a long time. As she stood there, staring blankly at her phone, it began to rain heavily, as if on cue. She dashed under the building's canopy, joining a few other company employees who were also seeking shelter. Violet glanced irritably at the clouds, which showed no signs of clearing up, and began to call a taxi. Her sadness quickly turned into anger towards her husband. 10 minutes later, the car arrived, and a shivering Violet hurriedly got in. As soon as she settled into the car, the driver cheerfully greeted her without turning around and started the trip. It seemed to Violet that she recognized the driver. During the ride, the man said a few more things, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they had met before. She checked the trip details in the app on her phone and looked up the driver's name. Yes, it was her old classmate who had left school in the 9th grade. "Matthew, I didn't recognize you at first," Violet exclaimed happily. The former classmate turned around, surprised, and recognized her too. One word at a time, they got to talking. The evening traffic jams played to their advantage. Matthew was thrilled by the unexpected reunion and invited Violet to a cafe. She agreed without hesitation. She needed to unwind, and no one was waiting for her at home anyway. She returned home after midnight, her husband still absent. Feeling inspired by the surprise meeting, she went to bed, still abuzz with the day's events. Back in school, Matthew was the heartthrob of their class. She used to be too shy to approach him. Now, they sat comfortably over tea, chatting like old friends. A few hours later, her drunken husband stumbled into the room, unable to quietly open the door and enter the room. He hinted at intimacy. He reeked of alcohol, and she roughly pushed him away, sending him to the sofa in the living room. She felt deeply hurt. Over the next week, her meetings with Matthew continued. He started calling her and inviting her for short walks after work. It was clear that Matthew had feelings for Violet. A recent quarrel with her husband has only increased her desire to continue dating Matthew. Gradually, their relationship began to turn from friendly to romantic. Violet started staying late at work almost every day, claiming that it was the end of the reporting period and everyone was working overtime. She always took a taxi home. Jack didn't find anything suspicious until one day he noticed his wife's return through the window a few times. For the second day in a row, the license plates on the taxi were the same. How could that be a coincidence in a city full of cars? He wondered. When Violet came in and started changing her shoes, her husband, without greeting her, immediately asked, "Who's driving you home every day?" "I've seen the same license plates for 2 days straight." "Who is it?" he demanded. "Jack, I think your memory is failing you. You should get that checked out," she replied coolly. The next day, Jack decided to get to his wife's office early to keep an eye on her movements. Right at 6 o'clock in the evening, when everyone usually finished working, the same car he'd seen for the past few days pulled up to the building. There was Violet, not staying late at work, happily heading to the car and getting into the front seat. "Gotcha," Jack thought, discreetly tailing them as they drove off. They cruised around the city for a while, and as dusk settled, they headed to a forest park, a place devoid of pedestrians and cars in the evening. To avoid being seen, Jack parked far away and walked through the park, hiding behind a tree near where they had parked. He watched intently. They started kissing. The driver pushed back his seat, and Violet climbed on top of him, beginning to undress. At that moment, Jack bolted from his hiding spot, yanking open the front door and dragging his bewildered wife out, tossing her aside. He then began hitting her lover in the face. When Violet finally realized what was happening, she screamed and called for help, but the park was deserted. After a few more punches, Jack stopped and stared his unfaithful wife straight in the eyes. "Your things will be outside. Don't even think about coming home," he declared. Violet, through her tears, wanted to say something, but chose not to provoke him further. It was only then, caught red-handed, that she realized she had crossed a line. The divorce was swift. Her belongings were indeed waiting for her in garbage bags at the entrance. Later, Violet tried to apologize to her husband, but it was too late.